Hey traders, it's John Fortune here with this week's Weekly Forex Forecast. I hope you're having a nice weekend as always. We're going to start off as we always do with the US dollar index. Be sure to watch the video all the way through to the end because as we go through the markets, we are going to be highlighting ones to watch for the week ahead. So as always, starting off with the dollar index, last week we were looking for a correction back down towards the 90.02 and we did start to correct down and we stopped just shy of this. And the market is now structured for a potential rally into the 91.01. We noted in previous videos, it looks like the dollar index is in a fourth wave overall. This is a correction of the much bigger downtrend. And we are looking at some point, I would expect a fifth wave to come down in the dollar index. So the question is this going to continue up for one last push into the 91.01 before starting to reverse to the downside? Or are we going to start to break the 89.92 and start the next fifth wave to the downside if that's what's coming in the dollar index? Well, going into next week, we may have the answer to that question because on Wednesday we have FOMC. So what is most likely to happen, as always, we can only discuss probabilities here, but what is most likely to happen is that the market is going to do nothing. And then on Wednesday, it will either break to the upside or it will break down below the 89.92. And that will be the deciding factor when we have the FOMC on Wednesday as to the next direction in the US dollar index. Now, that's completely fine because don't forget, as traders, short-term traders, we are looking to be reactive in the markets. When you're short-term trading, you want to be reactive. You don't want to try and be predictive of short-term moves. If you're looking for longer-term positions and you're position trading, then yes, you're studying the economic data, you're looking to be predictive rather than just reactive. But with short-term trading, we want to be reactive. So in terms of the dollar index, really is a question of waiting for FOMC to come out. If we do break above and we start to break out after Wednesday in the FOMC, I would be interested in looking for one final push up into the 91.01. And if the market goes nowhere and we start to break below the 89.920 next week, like this, that would actually kickstart our bearish bias once again on the dollar index. It would be a sign that the next potential fifth wave to the downside is coming. And after that, I would start to look for corrections and short positions, so dollar short positions down for the next fifth wave. So again, I think the dollar index next week is really going to be something which we're not going to be able to determine until we have that press conference on Wednesday. And then we can be reactive to what is happening in the markets rather than trying to be predictive on a short-term basis. Next, we have crude oil. Now, crude oil is structured to the downside going into next week. This is a secondary trend, what's known as a secondary trend. The primary trend is to the upside. We're making lower lows and lower highs to the downside. So we're only interested in short positions because we don't know when this secondary trend is going to end. So any correction towards the 53.25 would be viewed as a potential opportunity to look for bearish breakouts down towards the next key support to the downside and the target set. So being reactive, looking for those reversals to the 58.48. Notice this week we have not highlighted this as one to watch, although we are always looking at all charts to be reactive on them. And that is simply because this is a secondary trend rather than trading in the direction of the primary trend. When we have fully fledged trends in these markets, we will highlight these as one to watch for the week ahead. Next, we have euro-dollar. Now, euro-dollar is structured to the downside going into next week. This is a secondary trend, these lower lows and lower highs we're seeing in euro-dollar. We're looking for a pullback last week and we did get this. So any breakout to the downside in this markets next week is going to be viewed as an opportunity to look for bearish positions down towards the next key support to the downside and the target set at 1.2059. Just bear in mind, as with all the dollar pairs next week, these moves will likely be decided from Wednesday onwards after FOMC. Next, we have pound dollar. Now, last week we took out the target to the upside at the 1.3711. This market is in a fully fledged uptrend and therefore we are looking for moves to the upside in the direction of the primary trend. That makes this one to watch going into next week. Any correction, therefore, in this market back towards the 1.35380 is going to be viewed as an opportunity to look for bullish reversals. And we're going to be looking up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at 1.3800. Next, we have US dollar yen. Now, US dollar yen goes into next week structured to the downside in line with the overall primary trend. So it makes this one to watch as well next week. We've already started to correct to the 103.90. This is therefore a great place to start to look for bearish reversals. And we're going to be looking down towards the next key of support to the downside and the target set at the 102.88. Next we have Aussie dollar. Now we go into next week with Aussie dollar structured to the downside. It is in a secondary trend. The primary trend is still to the upside. So any pullback to the 0.7770 is going to be viewed as a potential opportunity to look for bearish reversals in this market down towards the next key of support to the downside, the target set, the 0.7660. Next we have New Zealand dollar. Now last week we highlighted the 0.71140 as the key area of support to the downside, and we did take out this target and bounced in this market last week. The market is structured to the downside. This is in a secondary trend also to the downside, and I would only be looking for longs above the 0.72390 as a resumption of the primary trend. So any pullback to the 0.72170 next week is going to be viewed as an opportunity to look for potential bearish reversals to the downside, down towards the next key of support to the downside and the target set, the 0.7097. Next we have US dollar Swiss franc. US dollar Swiss franc is structured to the upside, so I'm only interested in long positions in this market currently. It is also a secondary trend. The primary trend is still to the downside in this market. So any deeper pullback towards the 0.8787 is going to be viewed as a potential opportunity to look for bullish reversals. And we'll be looking up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set in this market, 0.8919. Next market we have is US dollar CAD. US dollar CAD is structured to the downside, and this is in line with the primary trend, making this one to watch for next week. Any deep correction towards the 1.27810 is going to be viewed as an opportunity to look for bearish reversals to the downside. And if we get those reversals, if we start to break out to the downside, we're going to be looking down towards the next key of support to the downside and the target set, the 1.2578. Next we have gold. Now you notice gold is not highlighted here, so this is also in a secondary trend. Secondary trends tend to be more corrective, and we still have a target to the downside of the 1801.02. So I would only be interested in short positions in gold. Any deeper correction and a reversal to the downside would be viewed next week as an opportunity to look for short positions down towards the next key of support to the downside and the target set of the 1801.02. So once again, just bear in mind that all dollar pairs come with the caveat of FOMC next Wednesday. Next we have Euro Yen. Now Euro Yen is structured to the downside, also in a secondary trend. Notice how many markets this week are in secondary trends. This is what a corrective US dollar will do across the board. We are still focused on only short positions in this market. We highlighted the 125.15 last week, and we did take out this target and we started to bounce. Any breakout to the downside in this market would be viewed as an opportunity to look for short positions down towards the next key of support to the downside and the same target as last week at the 125.15. Next we have franc yen. Now franc yen is structured to the upside in the direction of the primary trend, making this one to watch for next week. It may be the case that next week we finally break out of this correction, which we have been in really since the end of December, or beginning of December in fact. So very simply put, going into next week, any correction in this market is going to be viewed as an opportunity to look for bullish reversals. And if we start to break out to the upside, we're going to be looking up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 117.87. Next we have pound yen. Now last week pound yen took out the target to the upside almost to the pip at the 142.280. Going into this week, it is still structured to the upside in the direction of the primary trend, making this one to watch for next week. Any correction back towards the 140.950 is going to be viewed as an opportunity to look for bullish reversals in this market. We're going to be looking up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 142.70. Next we have Aussie yen. Now Aussie yen is in a secondary trend going into next week ahead of FOMC. We are only interested therefore in short positions in this market. Unless we can break the 80.84, then we will start to have a bullish bias on this market. Any correction back towards the 80.67 therefore next week will be viewed as an opportunity to look for potential bearish reversals in this market down towards the next key of support to the downside and the target set at a 79.52. Next we have CAD yen. Now CAD yen is structured to the upside going into next week in line with the primary trend, making this one to watch for next week. We've already started to pull back to the 81.30, so any bullish reversal and any breakout to the upside in this market next week is going to be viewed as an opportunity to look for long positions up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 82.64. Next is New Zealand yen. Now New Zealand yen is structured to the downside. It's in a secondary trend, so I'd only be interested in short positions next week in this market. Any breakout to the downside, any bearish reversal in this market would be viewed as a potential opportunity to look for short positions. Down towards the next key of support to the downside and the target set at 73.65. Next we have Euro Franc. Now Euro Franc is trending to the downside, but it is a secondary trend. We've already pulled back and tested the 1.07820, so any breakout of this area would be viewed as a potential opportunity to look for short positions. Down towards the next key of support to the downside and the target set at the 1.0737. Euro Franc is very choppy by nature as a currency pair, so it is not usually high up on my watch list, but if you are looking to trade it, this would be the move we would be looking at in all likelihood. Next we have Euro New Zealand. Now Euro New Zealand is structured to the upside, but it is also in a secondary trend. So I'd only be interested in long positions in this market. Any correction back down towards the 1.6836 would be an opportunity to look for bullish breakouts up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 1.7103. Next we have EurUsd. Now EurUsd is structured to the upside, but again this is part of a secondary trend. You can see with your eyes the primary trend is to the downside. But next week I would only be interested in long positions if I were looking to trade this market. Any correction back down towards the 1.56380 would be an opportunity to look for potential bullish breakouts in this market. And I'll be looking up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 1.5828. And if we can break through here, we'll be looking up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and target 2 at the 1.6023. Next we have Euro Pound. Now Euro Pound is structured to the downside, and this is a market we've highlighted in previous videos. We are still in the direction of the primary trend, so again this would be one to watch going into next week. We've already bounced from the 0.89150, so very simply put, this is an area we can once again start to look for potential bearish reversals in this market, down towards the next key of support to the downside and the target set at 0.8815. Next we have Euro CAD. Last week we were looking for a sell-off into the 1.53140, and we did take out this target last week before bouncing to the upside. Going into this week, we are structured to the upside after that rally at the end of last week in Euro CAD. This is now a secondary trend. Last week when we took out the target was in the direction of the primary trend. So I'm only interested in long positions, but just bear in mind it's a secondary trend. Any correction back towards the 1.5337 is going to be viewed next week as an opportunity to look for bullish reversals in this market. And we're going to be looking up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set, the 1.5566. Next we have Pound Franc. Now Pound Franc is structured to the upside in the direction of its primary trend, making this one to watch for next week. We've already tested the 1.2082, so any bullish reversal to the upside in this market will be viewed as an opportunity to look for long positions up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 1.2199. And if we can get a break through here, going to be looking up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and target 2 at the 1.2255. Next is Pound Aussie. Now Pound Aussie is structured to the upside in a secondary trend. I'd only be interested in short positions once we break the 1.75820. So going into next week, any pullback towards the 1.7616 will be viewed as a potential opportunity to look for bullish reversals in this market up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 1.7875. Next is Pound CAD. Now last week we were looking for a pullback into the 1.72090, and you can see we did test this area before rallying towards the target set from last week at the 1.7510. Very simply put, any correction once again in this market is going to be viewed as another opportunity to look for bullish reversals in this market. We're going to be looking up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 1.7510. You can see we haven't highlighted this one as one to watch next week, just simply because overall it is still fairly corrective and it is not yet in a full-blown uptrend. Next is Pound New Zealand. Now last week we were looking for a move into the 1.91470, and we did take out this target last week. Further advances to the upside in this market would be in line with its overall primary trend, making this one to watch next week. So any correction, any sell-off in this market is only going to be viewed as an opportunity to look for bullish reversals next week. We're going to be looking at initiating longs up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 1.9316. Next we have Aussie Franc. Now Aussie Franc is structured to the downside in a secondary trend, so any correction in this market next week to the upside will be viewed as an opportunity to look for potential bearish reversals in this market. And we're going to be looking down towards the next key of support to the downside and the target set at the 0.6780. Next is Aussie CAD. Now Aussie CAD is structured to the downside going into next week. This is also in a secondary trend. You can see the overall primary trend is to the upside. Any correction towards 0.98590 next week will be viewed as an opportunity to look for potential bearish reversals in this market, down towards the next key area support to the downside of the target set at the 0.9768. Next is Aussie New Zealand. Now last week we were looking for a trade into the 1.08290 and we did trade into and take out this target last week. This market took out its target to the upside in the direction of its primary trend last week, and so going into this week, once again, this will be one to watch. Any deep correction is simply going to be viewed as an opportunity to look for bullish breakouts in this market, and we're going to be looking at initiating longs up towards the next key area resistance, the upside of the target set at the 1.0841. Next we have New Zealand CAD. Last week we were looking for a decline into the 0.90670 and we did take out this target last week. This market is currently structured to the downside as part of a secondary trend, so this correction we're seeing, this pullback, is only going to be viewed next week as an opportunity to look for bearish reversals to the downside, and we're going to be looking down towards the next key area support to the downside of the target set at the 0.9032. Next we have New Zealand franc. Now New Zealand franc is structured to the upside. We're looking for bullish reversals in the direction of the primary trend, so this will be one to watch again for next week. We've started to pull back to the 0.6326, so any deeper correction is simply going to be viewed as an opportunity to look for bullish reversals, bullish breakouts to the upside. And if we start to reverse, if we start to break out in this market, we're going to be looking up towards the next key area resistance, the upside of the target set at the 0.6439. And last but not least, we have CAD franc. Now last week we were looking for a move into the 0.70490, and this happened to be in the direction of the primary trend. We did take out this target last week before this sell-off, and this is actually a near-term reversal in this market. Going into this week, I would only be interested in short positions in this market, as it does look like we're setting up head and shoulders. Any correction back towards 0.70320 would be viewed as an opportunity to look for a right shoulder breakdown. And I'd be interested in looking for bearish reversals in this market down towards the next key area support to the downside of the target set at the 0.6928. And if we can get a break through here, we'll be looking down towards the next key area support to the downside and target 2 at the 0.6880. So that is it from me for this week, guys. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please let me know by liking, sharing and subscribing. A big thank you to everybody who does that on a regular basis, and a big thank you to everybody who comments on the channel on a regular basis as well. I want to wish you all a fantastic weekend, and I want to wish you all the best in your trading next week, keeping an eye out for FOMC on Wednesday. With that said, have a great weekend. The only thing left to say is take care and don't forget to trade safely.